You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. This weekend, virtuoso pianist Alexei Volodin makes his return to Winnipeg in back-to-back nights with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra and a solo afternoon recital presented by the Women's Musical Club of Winnipeg. Ahead of this whirlwind weekend of music making, Alexei has joined me in the Classic 107 studio. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me here, Simeon. It's a big pleasure to talk to you again.
Well, it's nice to welcome you back. We last had you in studio for a conversation back in March 2020, ahead of your marathon performance of all 5 Beethoven concerti. A memorable concert for many reasons, including your incredible stamina and artistry, but also because it was the last normal concert that, at least for me, I attended before the world shut down at the outbreak of the global pandemic. We all know what happened next. What do you remember about that trip to Winnipeg?
That was my last concert before the pandemic and before the lockdown. It was indeed the last concert. And you know what? I was thinking of a very curious coincidence. It happened to me for a few seasons that I would always close my season with Beethoven choral fantasy. It's pure coincidence, but really a curious one. I would always close my seasons with Beethoven choral fantasy, and then I would go on vacation. And the last time I played, I told my wife, look, this time I'm not going on vacation. This is just in the middle of the season. And look what happened. Yeah, I couldn't believe myself. I played it, and that was it.
And that was it.
For a long while, yeah.
For a very long while.
Yes.
Certainly not a vacation, but a forced stoppage. That's for sure. Midway through the season. And
yes.
You know, what a trip that was, and what an opportunity for us to really hear your incredible playing.
Thank you.
You know, and then after that, it certainly has been a turbulent time in the world. I mean, the pandemic, the drastic changes to our planet amidst the climate crisis, and then geopolitical tensions and aggressions, which sort of leads me to this next question. And I'm sure you know where I'm going here. But you emerge from the pandemic, you start to get your feet back under you, you start performing again, and then just over a year ago, Russia invades Ukraine. And there have been, of course, countless repercussions of this, including in the classical music world, a number of Russian artists blacklisted. Right from the get-go, you publicly denounced the war, and you've continued performing. So I guess my question is, what's it been like being a Russian musician performing the past year?
Well, you know, I don't know if I'm a typical case of a Russian musician performing or not. It's difficult for me to say because, as far as I know, not all of the musicians were asked to speak out or to condemn the war or say something. I mean, some of them, and we know whom they were, definitely asked to do that, and they didn't say anything. That's a very famous case. To be honest, I was not asked much about it. It just came from my heart. I just said myself because when the whole thing started, I just couldn't live with myself if I didn't speak against, because I thought, and I continue to think so, that is a duty of everyone. But the situation is so tough right now that those who don't speak, especially those who live there, I think those cannot be criticized because we don't know. We know what secret services can do, and I mean, we cannot really accuse those people who try to protect themselves and their families, literally their lives. But those who live in the West, of course, they're more privileged, and I am in a much more privileged position, and I just couldn't keep my mouth shut, to be honest.
Well, we know music director Daniel Reiskin has been very vocal in his repudiation of the war. He's a dear friend of yours, and so thankful that the two of you have reunited here in Winnipeg.
Yeah, I'm very glad.
To perform another marathon series of concerti. Rachmaninoff's third and second in that order. I can't think of a better way to ask this question, so I guess I'll get right to it. How do you do it? How do you tackle these incredible monumental works?
No, but you know, that's I cannot give you exact answer. It's not actually, I know it sounds very silly, but it's not even that difficult, to be honest. I mean, these concertos are part of my, not only mine, but almost every pianist standard repertoire, and I have done it dozens of times. So I think the only task remains is to play them well every time. And we're not getting younger, unfortunately, but the tasks of the concertos are all the same. They're incredibly difficult. Also, if we try to continue growing as musicians, of course, we continue to have certain doubts and trying to, if not surpass ourselves, what we did before, but at least to stay on the level or to find something new, whatever. I mean, basically continuing to work on the piece. So, but that all remains. But just how we do that, I mean, that is just part of our professional life. That is not so hard. To play the notes is never haven't been easy, but that's what we do.
It's what you do, and you do it so well. I guess one of the other things that I'm thinking about is, I mean, you know, you're going to go into a marathon weekend of music making, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. But just out of curiosity, how many concerti do you have ready to go in your repertoire if an orchestra comes calling?
Well, I think I have in my repertoire not too many. I think it's around 70 concertos and
Sorry, 70, like 70.
Yeah, it's not too, no,
not too bad.
Again, it's not too bad indeed, but it's not. I don't think I never tried to set any records or to surpass people with the quantity. I think quality, which is what really matters. I mean, sorry for saying such banalities in front of you, but that's what I believe in. But anyway, life is long, and already I learned around 70 by now. But out of the 70, not everything I can just pull out of my sleeve and go in the same day. But I would say many of them, maybe 30 or 40 concertos I can play right away. But though some other concertos I will need to bring back and spend some time with them before.
So let's chat about these Rachmaninoff concerti. You're going to be performing them out of order. It's going to go third on Friday, second on Saturday. And I want to ask you about that out of order programming. Was this a case of kind of getting the big one out of the way first? I mean, it is really considered to be a sort of Mount Everest in the repertoire.
It is indeed, but I think the programming was in the hands of the orchestra and Daniel Raskin. I think they tried to cope with some big symphonic pieces. I think they decided what to put first or second. In fact, it's no specific conception from my side if we talk about the order, which concerto goes first.
Yeah, it doesn't really kind of factor in that way.
Not really.
So then, in terms of the concerti themselves, these kind of, I mean, they're written rather close together, but they're in sort of different points in Rachmaninoff's life. There's the second that's composed right at the turn of the 20th century, near the beginning of his career, where he really seemed to be almost like kind of composer and pianist. We know he was a virtuoso pianist, but he was really kind of working as a composer. And then the third, he wrote in Dresden after he'd left Russia, and then it premieres after his immigration to the United States, where he was very busy as a pianist, right? He was touring and doing all of that. As a soloist, do they feel different? Like, does the third has more notes, but do they feel more economical, better in hand that way?
Well, yeah, that's true. The third he composed for his own concert tour, which was forthcoming, and I think in the States actually. So
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But he himself, I think musicians in general are very moody in a way, because they can be affected by their own experience on stage. For example, I remember him writing in one letter, he said second was uncomfortable to play, and he learned the third, which is now much more comfortable. But then in some other letter he says that he only, from the 11th performance, he kind of got it right, and it starts to come out. So you really know what to trust. I think both ends, I mean, all of these things are kind of, they're valid in a way. It depends on what was on his mood on that day, how he felt about himself, because, he was a huge virtuoso, but he had huge also demands from himself. Sometimes he played like shoemaker. He still didn't learn how to play piano, but then tomorrow he would say a completely different thing, and doesn't mean we have reasons not to distrust him. I think on the contrary, everything was very genuine. He was saying it's just like this. I mean,
yeah, this is how I feel this day.
Exactly.
This is how this is going, and we all go through moods.
Yeah, of course. I mean, to us, Rachmaninoff probably he always sounded absolutely great, but not to himself, and that's a part why he was so great, because his demands from himself were so huge. But the result also that probably not always he felt so great about himself, and that would provoke him saying such things. So that's also completely normal. Probably considered first 10 times, maybe not that great.
Yeah, of course. As you kind of settle into things. I mean, in a way, it's understandable.
Completely normal.
Great demands on himself, great demands on the pianist such as yourself, tackling the third. I want to get to the second, because it is a beloved part of the repertoire. It features that iconic theme, one that melts even the coldest of hearts. This is just a textbook example of lush, colorful orchestration and sweeping romanticism. And it begins in such unique fashion. There are these pianissimo chords that build and build before just this unleashing of arpeggiation and again, that virtuosity. How do you interpret that opening? It is you alone on the stage.
Well,
how do you think of that introduction?
Difficult. It's difficult because second for me, I would try not to use this word difficult too much, because people would associate it with constant physical struggling or something like that. But for me, responsibility is so huge, because there are not as many notes in the second as there are in the third, so each note counts even more, and it's so much in the ears of people, and everything is so logically and beautifully written. So the chances to spoil the music are even a little bit higher than in the third. I mean, and you have to build up this bell-like chords so precisely and so convincingly. So you cannot start this crescendo too soon, and you cannot start it too late. So many things you have to avoid, and so many things you have to provide. So in these aspects, I have a lot of psychological pressure. So much is being awaited from you, if I can say that, expected from you.
Yeah, there's that anticipation as it
exactly.
builds, as you walk out to the, we know this one.
Exactly, and this is also like a sound of history. I mean, there's like musical history in present. There.
Yeah.
And it has to be alive under your fingers. I mean, that's a big deal. It's a big thing.
You mentioned kind of that idea of the pealing bells with those strong chords. I mean, that is kind of one way that we think about it. Yeah. I've also heard it talked about, it's almost like a sort of like warm-up for the pianist, because you start pianissimo with the chords, and then they build and build and build as you get a feel for the keyboard, and then there's arpeggiation as your fingers start going. And then also the other thing that I think about too is the fact that it's almost like this ticking clock with hypnosis. And we know
it's everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild work, and one of those that again was written and dedicated to Nikolai Dahl, who was the hypnotherapist who helped Rachmaninoff kind of return from some anxieties.
Now there's a new theory. Apparently he had also a very beautiful daughter.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. So the theories are abound. And there's a lot to think about, and not to put more into your head. But one of the other things that we were just talking about, it's one of those works that everybody knows. And then the second movement, this gorgeous second movement. It's one of those concerti that, again, it's very familiar. Whether or not people can name it, they've likely heard it before. It's been used in movies. It's been used in all sorts of ways. It's also been recorded by countless pianists and orchestras. I imagine then when you unite with your friend Daniel Reiskin and work with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, that's got to help find that kind of common ground in terms of how you're going to approach the music and the tempi that you're going to take, right?
Yeah, well, I hope so. I mean, no, I'm pretty sure we know quite well each other with the conductor, and thankfully we are sharing same musical approach to things, and same aesthetics, more or less. I mean, I'm sure. And with this orchestra also we found common grounds playing Beethoven, so I have good hopes for Rachmaninoff, and let's see how that will go. I mean, I cannot say anything. I think everybody has to prove things with the actions, not with their words. Let's see how that goes.
Yeah, and you can see it at the Centennial Concert Hall this weekend, Friday, Saturday. If you're just tuning in, my name is Simon Rusnak, and I'm chatting with pianist Alexei Volodin ahead of his weekend of music making in Winnipeg, just talking about the back-to-back Rachmaninoff. And as if that wasn't enough, you're also going to be giving a solo recital presented by the Women's Musical Club of Winnipeg. Alexei, talk about making the most of your time in Winnipeg.
Yeah, since I'm already here, why waste another day? Let's play some recital.
So we talked a little bit about your stamina. Again, you sort of brushed it off so kindly. It's just what you do. But as if this Rachmaninoff wasn't stamina enough, you're also going to be performing Pictures at an Exhibition as part of this recital on Sunday at Hamayok at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, which is always special to hear Pictures at an Exhibition in a gallery.
Exactly. It's becoming almost redundant.
But so then let me ask you this. What's your relationship with this piece of music?
Well, I adore this piece, and I was quite reluctant to learn it for a long time because I never saw it as something truly pianistic. I was always admiring it as a piece of music, but I not necessarily wanted to play it myself. But, as we talked about Rachmaninoff, you can, always think he said something one day and something the other day. That applies to more or less everybody. And one day I wanted to learn it, and I learned it, and I think it's one of the biggest masterpieces of music in general. Not depending on piano repertoire, orchestral repertoire, whatever. So it's also big responsibility, big joy to play it. Very special piece, of course.
A very special piece indeed, and a special piece to the composer too, right?
Course,
I mean, dedicated to his dear friend Victor Hartmann.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful music of Modest Mussorgsky. What else is going to be on the program Sunday?
I start with Schubert Klavierstück No. 2, and then Beethoven's Sonata from Opus 78, which is not so much played, and Mettner's Sonata Ballade. That's the first half. And then Mussorgsky.
and then Pictures at an Exhibition.
Yeah, it sounds like a very long because I'm naming many pieces, but it's in its length, it's quite standard. It's 40 minutes in the first half and 30 minutes in the second half. A standard recital.
Well, one kind of last question I have for you, and again, this is sort of a big open-ended one, so thanks for bearing with me. But, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about the differences, and if there are any differences, when you're playing with an orchestra versus sort of like a solo recital, apart from the obvious? I mean, there's no orchestra in a solo recital, but do you prepare differently for the two of them?
No, I'm trying not to, because what you're doing is you're dealing with the music where it's written for piano solo or with orchestra or chamber music. Obviously, recital just contains so much more music and requires time-wise so much more preparation. So you have to just play much more, and you have to, my God, it's never-ending work. But same applies in a way to the concerto. If you really want to play in something on extremely high level, work never ends. So yeah, I'm trying not to divide how I prepare. Of course, I don't separate how you feel and how the music unfolds and what you feel on stage being alone or with 50 or whatever other people, that's already a different question. But how you prepare, no, I think this is the same way to prepare, totally, exactly the same.
Well, Winnipeg audiences are going to have the chance to see you both as soloist and in solo recital this weekend. Alexei, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Semyon. Tthank you so much.
Great to have you back in the studio.
Thank you. Thank you.